Hi, welcome to Startup Society's first talk of the day for Student Startup Day Ireland. Today we have Lucey for you. He's the founder and CEO of Lucey. He's directed a number of companies, including Pixar, Bosca Box, and MedX Note. And he's been an angel investor through the Lucey Fund, investing in over 150, I believe, tech companies since the fund's foundation just over 5 years ago. So I won't give you any more introduction for him. I'll let him introduce himself here. So here's Lucey.
Good to be invited. Not as much fun talking to students when I'm not getting the treat of going on campus and having fun. I think the last time I did a talk in DCU, I think it was third year computer science, and we had about 150, but two lads dying with a hangover, asleep in the front row, always brings you back to wanting to get back to college. So what I'll do is I'll talk you through some kind of concepts and stuff. I've talked to students all over the world and stuff and give them kind of tips and tricks and things that I would do. I think with the world of COVID and stuff like that and people figuring out what they're going to be doing after college, I've probably tweaked it a little bit. I think I'm going to take about 35, 40 minutes to talk. And if anyone has any questions for me afterwards or anything like that, please feel free to ask away. So the Lucey Fund, we started that. It's about 2000. I had my own tech companies beforehand. We started in about 2012. Over about a 5-year period, we did 150 startups. We're kind of a different fund in that we weren't your traditional VC that was writing you a check. We were doing a thing called venture tech, which is what a lot of people call us, kind of a sweat equity model, where we would go look at companies, and if we could give them our employees, we would give them our employees to go and do the work. Scaled up to about 80 to 90, nearly 100 staff at one stage. We stopped taking on startups about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Now we kind of manage a lot of those investments. Personally, I manage two companies directly at the moment. One is Pixalert. Pixalert is an old 20-year-old company we bought a couple of years ago. Interesting business. It came out of UCD originally, and it's in the business of porn, as we call it, in that it finds porn in corporate networks. So we would take a picture of a screen every few seconds, and it's actually interesting. Zoom calls cause us a lot of hassle at the moment because everybody is suddenly on video Zoom calls, and it's finding all the skin on the screens in corporate networks. As an interesting business, about 10 years ago, they realized instead of just looking for skin and pictures and pornography and stuff like that, they could find data. And we've actually a lot of customers in places like Nigeria. You might have heard of the old Nigerian email where the prince had the money. I've got $20 million in my bank account. The Central Bank of Nigeria didn't like that, and we put that technology to work to find credit card data and other bits of information that will be sitting inside in banks in Nigeria. And we have some of the Africa's largest banks as our customers, like Access Bank, for example, would have close to 50 million people that they bank for. Very interesting business, but we customized it then for GDPR and a lot of the new data protection stuff recently, and that's very much my day job at the moment. One other little business we have that we run as well directly is a thing called Gypsy, GIPSY. Take a look at it. It's a plugin for your house, and essentially for the cost of about Netflix a month, we provide corporate level cybersecurity for your home. So all traffic through the house can be managed. So we can probably best, if you were younger, you would not to be telling your parents, but it'll stop all porn, gambling, buying illegal drugs online, that kind of stuff, but also phishing attacks and things like that. So for the kind of concerned parent, it's a very, very popular product. I sit on a number of boards then. MedX Note is the company that kind of does stuff. It's like WhatsApp for hospitals, does a lot of stuff with the NHS, where it's literally taking consumer tools and putting the data on patients into the hands of doctors. Bosca Box, which is now recently rebranded to Bosca Sports, is an interesting one you should take a look at. It runs all the screens in the race courses in the United Kingdom, and in places like Paddy Powers, if any of you are interested in gone into the bookies. We would run a lot of the screens. Whereas before the newspaper would have been stuck to the wall. Now the newspaper is digital, and the runners and riders for the next race and the odds and everything else, they're all in there and they're constantly updating. So a lot of the big bookies now use that technology. But what I'm going to talk about today is just about you guys rather than me, and some of the kind of thoughts and ideas I had. So for me, I think there's one of three pathways that or reasons why people might be interested in this talk. They're thinking about being an entrepreneur. They're looking at getting a job at the end of things and want to see what's going to happen there. Or they're maybe just looking at it from a lifestyle point of view. You know, they're interested in it. So Richard Branson, when I was growing up, was considered the entrepreneur of choice. These days, there's probably a few different fellas. Zuckerberg, although he's probably hated. And a lot of people, there's a certain batch of people who want to be that. They want to be that leadership figure. They want to have the independence. They want to go and do it. And we think entrepreneurship is a lifelong process. It's a thing that changes. Richard Branson started selling, records and student magazines when he was younger. He's now probably more interested in space travel and hyperloops and things like that. It's a lifelong endeavor, and it's something that changes the way you can live your life. And it's certainly something we would encourage, but it's something that some people feel is only for the charismatic. And I don't believe that's true at all. I think some of the greatest entrepreneurs in the world would have been people who would have maybe been uncomfortable. Bill Gates would have a very different profile to the likes of Richard Branson. And yet Bill Gates is probably one of the greatest, not just technical founders, but business people, ever. So another reason you might be here is just how the heck am I going to get a job after COVID? I think you guys as students are in a tough position. All of us, the traditional way of educating people and bringing on new hires was you put them in a room with people who knew what they were doing. And, you kind of learned by watching and listening and doing stuff. I think when I would have entered the technology industry, it was definitely the most important thing was the person who was standing over your shoulder listening to what you were doing, or you listening to somebody else on a phone call to customers and things like that. That's a huge challenge in COVID. I found it myself. Across our startups, we take on a bunch of kind of people normally between kind of September. I know we do one thing with DIT. I don't know what we do at DCU, but with DIT, we take on a lot of third year students between third and fourth year from kind of March to September placements. I tried to take them on this year, but it was the first year we were doing it remotely. And we found it quite difficult because we weren't set up to teach people in that way. And we actually found it a bit frustrating for us and the students that they definitely didn't get as much benefit this year as we would have in other years. So I think for yourselves, if you're looking for work post-college, there's a few tips and things I want to give you as we go along here as to how you can maybe help yourself in a kind of a COVID world. Although hopefully we'll all have vaccines by the time you're graduated and we're all back to normal. The other thing is lifestyle. Entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily mean I need to go start the 100-person, 1,000-person, 10,000-person company. It can also be you taking control of your own career, your own earnings, and more importantly, how you live your life. As uncomfortable as that lady might look, or comfortable she looks in that hammock, it is interesting that like in the first lockdown in Ireland, I was in West Cork for 4 months. Got a house, very good broadband before everything locked down, figured it was going to, but I had the flexibility in my life, and so did my wife, and that we had already been set up to work from home, that we were able to just go away, and we had an amazing time. And I was about as far from the sea in West Cork as that lady is there for 4 months. And they're the kind of control mechanisms you can do in your life. So, when you decide you want to go to America for the summer or Australia after you graduate or whatever, you no longer need to go and maybe do that backbreaking strawberry picking type of job that you might have had in the past. And now you could maybe be earning money before you travel, while you're still a student, and while you're there, and have much more of a digital nomad lifestyle. So a couple of the kind of tips and things and stuff like that I'd look at. One of the things we'd say in the startup world is back in the 80s, everybody wanted to be in a band. Now everybody wants to be in a startup. All right. Startups became cool in the last couple of years, probably reached a crescendo with this movie. And you probably all think it's naff again afterwards, but people are interested in it because they see a lifestyle, they see an opportunity for large wealth, they see, other people are interested in the innovation. There's a lot of reasons as to why they would, but it's amazing how technology-based startups, and then even things like food-based companies, have given people an opportunity of a very different lifestyle than that boring 9 to 5 that they're maybe trying to avoid. And I think for a lot of you guys, I think it's good to take the glamour out of it, look at the reality and see where it fits you, your personality, your skill sets, and what you want to do with your life. Because at the end of the day, these are life choices that can leave you down different pathways. So you have a couple of huge advantages, and you have a couple of other things then that are disadvantages. So the disadvantages are, as I said, the likes of COVID, and how do we get into a workplace to learn from these people? If not, how do I get that remote job that lots of people are applying for? Right now you're in college, stay there. It's probably a bummer you don't get to party as much as you wanted to do and stuff like that. But I think it is also an opportunity to learn a lot of digital skills, things like this event here and stuff like that. It's amazing how you wouldn't realize it, but the professions and different senior people had no comprehension how to interact using these tools, and it's a huge advantage that you have. I remember when the lockdown happened, my lawyer was saying to me, I need you to come in and we'll meet. And I said, I don't want to go into your office. I don't want to meet you. Don't want to do it. We need to have a meeting. Why don't we have it digitally? And he'd never had a Zoom call. So 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, when I was hiring graduates, it used to bother me that you had poor Word and Excel skills, and even your PowerPoint was poor. Over the last few years, I've noticed as more and more that technology is used in colleges to do presentations and things like that, the quality of your PowerPoint presentations has greatly increased in the last 4 or 5 years. But also, you're coming into a digital world now, from a digital education, where your comfort with doing things in environments like this is actually one of your big pluses. And you must realize that the life you've lived on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it might be can be a huge advantage to businesses that are owned by old farts like myself, who actually want to tap into your knowledge of that kind of digital. And if you look at Dublin as an opportunity, the startup scene in Dublin, the Irish startups, they can be quite poor, and I'll mention that in a while. But what you do actually have is Dublin is the landing spot for the coolest Silicon Valley companies who want to get into Europe. And there are job opportunities there for you. It's about you figuring out what you want to do. But it's, getting a job isn't the opposite of entrepreneurship. There's a lot of entrepreneurship where you become, some of these companies are solving enormous problems. There was a time when Google staff here were just sales and marketing people, but more and more you're finding these businesses have technology-based businesses here. So the innovation is happening in Ireland. And if you can get into these organizations, and I find a lot of the time you can get in there with some good research and a good pitch as to what you are. And the way we always say it to people is be interesting and interested. All right. Why is that important? I think I got the best out of college because I joined into everything. When I went there with my friends from secondary school, there was the guys who sat and played poker. And they played poker in the canteen hour after hour after hour. Me, I joined every society. I joined everything, tried everything, failed miserably at some stuff, did the debating, did everything else. I ended up in the National Students' Union. I was very into it. And it set me up for my career. But what's interesting is you get a lot of people when we look at young people's CVs and you don't have a lot of years of work, we're actually sometimes we're partially interested in your results, but a lot of the time your other interests are the things that separate you. So while you're sitting in college and while you're attending events like this, I'd include these things in your CV. I'd offer to get more involved, because if I'm an employer and I'm trying to pick between 100 students and I'm looking to see who are the 3 or 4 people coming in, I want the person I feel that's going to invest into our culture. Especially here, American startups and these big American tech companies, they're interested in their culture. They're interested in someone that's going to come in, be enthusiastic, show an interest in something and be interesting. And this is the most important thing if you are looking to break into that circle of some of these big FDI companies. And the amazing thing is, when you get into these foreign direct investment FDI companies, the big American tech companies, it's quite easy to move from one to the other afterwards. And the reason for that is the American companies like to hire people who understand their culture. So if you get into Google or somewhere like that, you'll find that HubSpot and others are very keen to pay you. The wages are good. The perks are great. I would definitely look and plan ahead for this. So plan to be involved and plan to be interesting. Any of you know The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? You'll know the answer to life is 42. And the reason I put it in there is Bloomberg and others say that actually the most successful companies are started by people who are 42 or 43, which is my age now, and not students. So a lot of people feel, oh, I'll only ever be an entrepreneur if I'm like Richard Branson and I started at 17. That's not the case. A lot of the best entrepreneurs are people who've worked in other places, learned, understood, got really interested in a particular industry, and then scaled out from there and eventually went, I'm going to take my spin on that industry and I'm going to make it even better. And I did it myself. I was working for my other people up until I was probably 30, 31. Another little one is in terms of, this is the classic Apple starter one. All right. If you are going to look to start something, don't do it on your own. Do it with a friend. All right. Why? Because I'm clicking on the wrong thing there. Can you see this? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So look to do that. And the reason for it is you'll find that everybody has pluses and minuses. And, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak was the classic example of the salesman and the techie. They learned from each other over time, and you find you begin to complement each other. Plus, it's not as lonely a road. The other thing I would say about it as well is when I'm starting businesses, and the ones I mentioned to y'all, I'm in a very much a B2B business space. Since I've been about 22, 23 in the workplace, I started working with accounting software. I sell a lot of software to businesses. It's easy for me to understand how businesses are run and how they're operating because I'm doing it myself. Our Gypsy product is very much around parents and startups, and they're areas that I understand being a parent and a startup myself. For you guys, I think what's really interesting is you're young and you'll have a better understanding of what youth-based businesses are looking for. So if I am starting something, I'd be looking at starting something for the demographic that you know and understand. It's amazing how many times we see people try to start companies in industries they know nothing about, but they have a bit of an idea. What you're saying there is you haven't even worked in an industry, but you're cleverer and smarter than everybody else that's gone before you in that industry. And normally you find that doesn't work too well. So look at what you're doing. And if I'm interested in anything, when I'm looking to hire people and bring people on, and if I was ever to go back to college myself, I'd be interested in 2 things, maths and psychology. Why? Understand the numbers and understand the behaviors of people. So why they buy particular products, why they want to live or work or do whatever it is in a particular way. The behavioral aspects are interesting. And a real challenge for you guys in an Irish college is expectation levels. Ireland is a small country with a small little market. people look at it and they go, oh, look, a 500,000 turnover or this, or, their expectation levels are wrong. I remember I was brought in to judge a DIT student competition, and all the students in DIT, when they put together their business plan for how much it was going to cost to start the business, I think the most expensive business to start was 30,000 euros. And I remember looking, going, this is just small change. These businesses need way more money. And about a week or two later, I was over in Berkeley in California doing the exact same thing. I was giving some talk to some students. They asked me to judge the student competition. And the average amount of money the students said they needed to start their businesses was $5 million. And it was just an expectation level of, I know how to do this. I'm going to be doing it seriously. And I'm not looking at it on the basis of, this is how much I live by. And probably the main reason for that different expectation is an Irish student is paying 2, 3, 4,000 quid a year to go to college. A Berkeley student is paying $40,000 a year. They have a lot more money to repay. So they're probably looking at bigger businesses. And if I was you guys, I'd be thinking like the Berkeley student and going, how is it? How do I make £1 million quid profit? How do I get it higher levels? And that level of expectation is one of the key dividers in how you go about your career and everything else that you do. Next thing is a startup. If you are looking for work right now, there are tons of startups out there who are looking to hire cheap people. All right. And right now, a student can be a cheap resource. Sometimes that can be just you're writing blogs for them, you're tweeting for them, you're doing basic customer service and stuff like that. And it's about going out there and researching it, looking for them, offering yourself. There's a lot of different meetups. There's a big community out there, and I'd really recommend, if that interests you, take a look at it. You might not get paid as much as you get paid to go down and work in a spa or work somewhere like that, but the experience you'll get will be dramatically different. And it is certainly something I would take a look for. All right. I'd also skill yourself up on how you can be a good hire for somebody. So this screen is a bit out of date. You'll need to Google it yourselves. I haven't been doing it now in a while, but we used to hire a lot of people from JobBridge, but a really interesting program with the likes of Acumen and Fusion, which were based out of Northern Ireland, and they were graduate recruitment programs. So what I would do if I was you is I'd go and figure out what are the graduate recruitment programs that are on, and I'd start looking for the company that I'd like to work for and go, I believe I can go in through this program, my wages can be partially paid, and I can benefit you in the following way. And I think when you start to do that, your opportunities will open up quite quickly. Acumen and Fusion, we'd used them in the past, brilliant programs. We had a couple of DIT students who were doing postgrads through Acumen who worked for us while studying at the same time. Acumen were paying half of their wages. So I think they were on 30, 35 grand a year. We were paying half of it. They were getting a postgrad out of Queen's University or somewhere like that. And I think those kind of programs, there's a lot of different ones out there, especially different kind of internship programs and stuff like that. And I'd take a look and see, because it's a good way to get yourself hired. Another thing to do is start your own business. All right. And there's a whole pile of freebies out there. And you may not need to start it to go and plan on making a lot of money. You may just start it to learn the process and the challenges of what you want to do. Fake it till you make it is one way we would say, and that it looks great on your CV afterwards to say, well, while I was in college, I tried to start the following business. Here's how it succeeded. Here's how it failed. Here's how I did. Here's how I didn't. The get up and go that shows, and the enthusiasm and the interest that shows is so well received by tech companies, startups, and businesses in general that it will be time well spent for you. And heck, it might even make you a bit of money as you go along. Plus, there's a whole pile of free programs out there for free software you can get to go do this. Amazon will give you a pile of credits. They'll give you a server. They'll let you put websites up there. Microsoft have similar ones. IBM have them as well. I'd actually take the freebies, use the likes of Wix.com, or there's a whole pile of them out there, and actually go try sell some stuff and see, can you make some money? That could be selling your own honey. It could be anything it is that you're interested in, your knitting, whatever it is you're interested in. But I would do it. I'd try sell it. I'd see how it works. It is an interesting story to tell the day you go looking for work. And it may just spark an interest for you to become an entrepreneur fully in your own right and go, this is a brilliant business. The Michael Dells of the world were the guys who were dropping out of college because they looked to sell stuff. They began to buy and sell stuff. And after a while, they did it full time. There's a whole load of places around Ireland. Every college, and DCU would be no exception. DCU has some excellent stuff, collections of startups up there. And I would, as a student of DCU, I think you're missing an opportunity not understanding the businesses that exist on your campus. There's probably anywhere between 20 and 40 businesses on your campus. And it's worth knowing who they are, what problems they try to solve, and it's worth getting in touch with them and going, is there anything I can do to help you? I think it's a huge opportunity, and every college has them. Another brilliant thing is Startup Weekend. I'd recommend this to people all the time. Go on, log on to the website, get the updates. They run regularly globally, and they run across Ireland. With COVID, a lot of them are digital now at the moment, but these things are super cool. You sign up, cost you 10 or 20 quid or something like that. You may have an idea, or you may just want to get involved. What happens is, on a Friday evening, the people who have ideas go in, they stand up in front of everybody, they pitch their ideas, and I think they select, depending on the size of it, the best 5 or 10 startup ideas. And then everybody decides which startup they're going to join. And they spend an entire weekend coming up with it while being mentored by people who understand the processes. I'd really recommend it. It's very, very cool. And again, at the very least, you learn a lot, and it's a brilliant stamp on your CV afterwards. So take a look at that. If you do decide to go up yourself, where do you get money from in Ireland? There's a few options. So when you get your great idea, there's friends and family, but we always say to people, make sure you end up in a situation where you're happy going into the family on a Sunday afternoon for dinner and everybody's not growling at you because you've taken all their money. Enterprise Ireland have a load of different schemes and have some really interesting student support schemes that come up quite regularly. The county enterprise boards, what they call them, they're always rebranding them now. LEOs they're called now, local enterprise board. They always have different schemes and little grants available to help people get businesses up off the ground. And the bigger your expectations and the more you go, the more money that's probably there to be able to do it. If you want money from Enterprise Ireland, these guys' teams are very important. They're not great with single entrepreneurs. So I'd always say to people, try to find people who can work with you if you want to untap that kind of stuff. As you get further along and you get more customers, the banks are there for you. Angel investors are kind of professional investors who are looking out for the next big thing. There's actually a surprisingly large amount of them that are looking around what's coming out of colleges and universities and what can they support and what can they do. A lot of the time, though, angel investment comes from kind of senior executives within an industry who see a young person like yourselves and go, actually, that person's got a very good idea. I'm going to back them. There's a whole venture capitalist industry. I won't go through that today. There's a whole lot of talks online as to how you get involved with these guys. You'd want to be trading in Ireland, you'd want to be making money, and you got to be looking to scale internationally and quickly to interest these guys to give you money. They're normally writing checks that start at about $500,000 but go up to tens of millions. As I said, there's a whole lot of incubator kind of groups and stuff like that around Ireland. They're always changing and updating, and I'd take a look at a lot of them. There's a good thing called a Startup Digest I'd sign up for too. It's a weekly email that tells you about a lot of the events and stuff like that that are happening around Dublin and Ireland, and I'd take a look at the likes of that. If you do want to raise money, sell something. Always be closing. You're all way too young for Glengarry Glen Ross, but one of the great sales movies. And one of the best ways to finance any business is just go out and actually sell something. Old school way then as well, we always mention is barter. You know, if you're struggling to get in there, you're struggling to get the right kind of experience, you really want to get in the door, barter something. That could be you're offering people your time in turn for some experience or something like that. But you do have insights. You're a young person in Ireland who's digitally comfortable, who is probably able to help a lot of people, and you don't realize the skill sets that you have. That could be just simple as knowing your way around Twitter, but it could also go into a lot more detail, and a lot of the technical stuff that you're learning in college, when put to practical use, can be very, very helpful. One that I've seen startups do, or students do all the time, is the likes of dropshipping. Right? If you go, God, I've never been involved in any business or never did anything, get yourself on eBay and see, can you learn how to dropship? What is it? You put products up, you have a look around, find products that you think are underpriced, put them up for sale for more. When somebody offers to buy it off you, you buy it from the guy who's selling it cheaper. You tell him to deliver it to the guy who's paying you. And before you know it, you're after making a little cut on a product that you've never actually touched. I've seen many a student pay for their college days using the likes of this type of stuff. eBay aren't huge fans of it, but eBay and Amazon and these guys, people have been doing this for years, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But it's a great way to get you into the learning of buying and selling particular products and stuff like that. The Newton has the old thing, if I see further new, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I think that's on the English pound. Great phrase, but a lot of the time, and I remember when I started my own business, I started out selling other people's stuff initially because I realized they gave me a better opportunity to get started and do it. I actually went to start my own business when I was about 26, and ended up working as a sales director for a company who were helping me do some of my tech before I went fully out on my own about 4 or 5 years later. Work with other people can allow you to get an awful lot farther. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And the last one then is business plans. If you do want to start a business, I'd really recommend that you write down what it is you want to achieve. The process of writing a business plan, and there are so many tools out there that will help you to do it, will allow you to think through the business that you have and to see is it there. And then the last thing I'd say is go meet people who understand the industry you're looking to crack and show them your business plan. Everybody's worried their great idea is going to be stolen. It happens. I've seen it happen. But it's a very rare thing. Mostly what will happen is you get advice from people who are being genuine. And when you do that, I think you have a great opportunity. Now, unfortunately, going to meet these people for coffees and stuff is probably pretty hard at the moment with COVID. But I would certainly say to look to interact with people who've done stuff before, throw ideas past them. You'll be amazed how happy an awful lot of people who've ran their own businesses are to answer a couple of quick questions. They're not there to run your company. They're not there to solve all of your problems, but you'll find it's amazing how easy it is to interact with people. And get yourselves on LinkedIn now. Even though you're not students, I've spoken to some students who said, our college lecturers told us don't go on LinkedIn because we have nothing to say. Get on there anyway. It's easy to create contacts and begin to sell a good story about yourself. Create the contacts and the network now, and it gives you the opportunity to go looking for the work or looking for the support when you want to start your own business. So they're kind of my main bits. Sean, if you want to throw any questions at me or anything like that, I think I'm relatively on time.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks very much for taking the time out to speak again. I think that was super interesting, and I'm sure everyone watching will be able to pull something valuable out of the talk anyway.
Cool.
I have 3 questions for you here to kick off the Q&A. I think we have about 54 people watching, so hi to everyone out there. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to start posting questions in the chat, and I think we can run for maybe another 20 minutes if that's okay, if we have enough questions, Ian.
No problem. Yeah.
Perfect. Great. So my first question for you, and it's I think one I briefly mentioned on the emails as we were chatting away over email, was I first met with you in 2015 at a Dublin startup weekend event. You probably don't remember. Maybe you do, but I was a secondary school student then, and
Yes,
I
I
pitched
do. We
you.
discussed this. Yes,
I
yes,
pitched you an idea of essentially a web application for monitoring diabetes in
yes.
diabetes patients for
We were
hospitals.
discussing that. You were a pain in the arse. Go on, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It was great though. I had it. You basically had an interest enough in the idea, and you invited me out to meet you, and I got a day off school, so I was happy out.
Happy out. No, you
Um,
were very good. I remember that well, yeah.
yeah, and I was curious. You basically said to me then, because I had no personal overheads, and because it was at its core software application that I'd be selling, so I'd have no overheads, that I didn't really need investment.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, would you generally give the same advice to the third level students? And at what stage would you say it's appropriate for somebody to come to look for investment?
I actually, I think the startup community is obsessed with who raises the most money, are considered the coolest people. Oh my God, that company has raised 100 million. They're incredible. Oh no, they've got 150 million. They're even better. It's a nonsense, all right? If you can start your own business, own 100% of it, go out and sell some stuff. And if you need, the only reason you should be looking for investment is because you've proved your product and you want to get out and scale that product up quickly now. You know, there's an awful lot that you can do. Like you can buy a Wix website now for $7 a month, right? It's a good quality one. You want to put a payment system into it or something like that, you're paying $20, $30 a month. It is cheap, right? If you need space to host stuff, Amazon will give you the first $10,000 free. You know, they're selling storage space now like a drug dealer sells cocaine. They're giving you the first few hits for free to get you hooked. Then you're hosting with them and you're never leaving afterwards, right? So if you need to get something built and you're not a techie, the first thing I'd be doing is I'd be looking in college because there's thousands of people in there. There's a load of computer science students. And I'd be going, who's the clever one here? Who's interested in it? And come on, let's go make something. You know, it was interesting. When I grew up in Cork, my dad used to do foxers, as we call them in Cork, nixers they're called in Dublin, you know, where he worked for the HSE as a painter, but he did painting and decorating in the evening. And when I got my first full-time jobs, I naturally started to do work in the evening because I thought that's what everybody did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those kind of second jobs and third jobs to raise money. And some of the first software I sold for myself, I was working for an accountancy software company, and myself and my buddy, it was to produce sets of accounts. And a bunch of their customers wanted to produce a formal set of accounts in Irish, and the company wasn't doing it. And I said, actually, I did Irish. I said, I did my leaving cert through Irish, but I said, I have a few buddies out in Funter. Does Funter still exist out in DCU? He was actually, my buddies were in the first ever year of that Entrepreneurship, Computers and Finance through Irish degree that they had out in DCU. It was very popular. And myself and my buddy sat down for 2 nights and converted all the software into Irish, and we were allowed to just go in and sell the license. And we used to get great cash out of it, you know? And it was just us helping my day job business because they didn't want to provide it. I provided it, and we got the cash. And I remember in the first year, the two of us, maybe on top of our wages, picked up about 5 or 10 grand each in cash, and the two of us were delighted, you know. And they're the kind of things that I think you can start with, start simple and do it. If you've got a brilliant idea and you can show there's customers there and you can show there's revenue there, but it's going to cost $500,000 or $1 million or 2 million to get it started, then you really just need to build that business case to prove it, you know. But a lot of these businesses can be proved with smaller revenue amounts, smaller amounts. And, you know, PR in Ireland, it's easy to get yourself in the newspaper in Ireland if you give them an interesting little story, especially if you're a student. They love all that stuff.
Yeah, so you mentioned yourself there almost starting a mini startup for the own firm you worked for, helping them out. And you mentioned during the talk there that you find there's a lot of crap Irish startups almost coming and going. Do you think there's something missing in like the local like Irish homegrown startup communities, the startups that are out there?
Ireland's startup scene is that we've described as like a methadone clinic, right? In that they're all looking for their next bit of government money, their next little hit of methadone, but they all really want the heroin, which is the big proper financing. And the problem in Ireland is we don't have good financing. So if you look at Stripe or Swerve or any of the kind of the big Irish companies that have been super successful, most of them have avoided Enterprise Ireland, got on a plane and made it out in San Francisco.
Yep.
There is finance here for good companies, but there's a lot less of it. So you need to be really, really good to get it. And a lot of the time, if I'm a VC, or I'm an older lad looking to part with money, the first thing I'm going to say is, oh, what have you really got? How do you know about this? Like an interesting Irish startup you should look at is Let's Get Checked. He came to me probably about 7 or 8 years ago, and I remember him going thinking, Jesus, he's cocky, right? But he knows what he's on about. He was only about 26, 27 at the time. He's gone on now to do really, really well. It started with home STD things, for people who are embarrassed to go in and check with their GP that they caught something. You could get it, you'd pay well to get it sent to your house rather than going into your GP. And he's now selling COVID tests by the million. You should take a look at them. Let's Get Checked. Really, really interesting. But he was a guy only a couple of years out of college, huge amount of research done, understood his market, really driven guy. It was him on his own initially, but he built a brilliant team of people around him, and he's built an amazing business now. And there will come a time in the next couple of years where you'll hear some press story about he has sold that thing for hundreds of millions. And he's a good example for all of you if you're looking at doing something as a student, because he was only a few years out of college when he started that business.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating, even the way he's able to adapt to the current climate, obviously, with the pandemic and the tests, as you mentioned.
Yes.
One question here in from the chat is a student wondering, how do you reach out to angel investors for raising seed capital as a student entrepreneur? Is it LinkedIn? Is it competitions?
The funny thing about angel investors is, right, we don't have a huge group of formal angel investors in Ireland. The reason for that is if I invest in Ireland and I put money into you, I get 30% of it back against my taxes, and I get 11% back a couple of years from now if you're still in business. In England, I get nearly 80% of the money back. All right. So there's way more investors in London, and you're only a Ryanair flight from one of the global centres of finance, one of the biggest of them until Brexit, which might hit them hard. But you've huge opportunities between London and Dublin. You can go through the likes of DBIC, which manages a lot of the more formal angel investors. But the trick we've always said is a very simple one. If you're looking for investment, ask for advice. If you're looking for advice, ask someone for investment. And what you should do is, if you think you have something in a really good industry, so let's say I remember going through this with one of the guys, and he had a really good innovation in the taxi industry. All right. The most likely investors for you are probably the owners of taxi companies, or someone who's already invested into that industry and is interested in putting a bit of money into you to support you and go do that. And they're the types of people that we would suggest that you take a look at. So you can find them on LinkedIn. The really good thing to do is, if I'm looking for somebody, all right, and I want to try to get some cash out of them, I'll use LinkedIn. I'll look at the industry I'm looking at. I'd look for senior executives within that industry, because you want someone over 45 or 50 whose kids are reared, they're on a good money, and they have cash to spare. Maybe they've even retired from it recently. And I would be meeting them and offering them to go for coffee and saying, you are an expert in this industry. I'm thinking of doing this. Would you give me some good ideas or any thoughts or feedback as to why I'm wrong? All right. And it's a really, really good way to do it, because they'll start to tell you from their point of view why something they believe will work or not work. And near the end of the conversation is when you slip into them and you say, now, if this is going to work, where would I get the finance in your industry to be able to go do that? and either that person has it, or they might be able to point you in the direction of others that do it. I'd really recommend something like that.
Great. Feel free, guys, if more people in the watching now have questions, just send them in the chat there. Another question from myself, I think when you showed the picture of Richard Branson there towards the start of the presentation, you mentioned entrepreneurship is a lifelong process. And I guess my question would be, have you ever denied someone investment to then invest in them later, whether it was a different idea or maybe they came back with a better plan a year later?
Yeah, now funnily enough, a lot of the stuff we didn't invest in younger people. We invested in older people. And one of the reasons for that is because we were doing this kind of venture tech model where we were wrapping techies and stuff around someone. We were looking for people who understood an industry but didn't have the team to be able to bring that idea to life. And so a lot of the time, the people we were dealing with were people who had, industry experience that had been working for numerous years to be able to do it. But it's interesting to see the people that pivot. Most of the time, your first idea is not the thing that you end up selling. A lot of the time the idea can kind of come about and it formulates when you begin to realize, well, who's happy to buy this or who's not. Like we were looking at, if you take our Gypsy product, for example. So as I said, basically what this thing is, and this is a good example of us trying to fit a product. So we were in the middle of buying a company that they create the databases of the phishing attacks and the other ways in which people try to attack you online. And this business sells those lists of attacks to, McAfee and Cisco and all these companies that create hardware. While they were doing it, they created their own little product using a Raspberry Pi, and they put their own lists and databases and everything else onto this piece of hardware and went, we can plug this into your home Wi-Fi and it'll enable you to secure your home. So we're going to give you the software to run on this cheap little piece of hardware, and it'll give you the same protections as if you were working in the head office of Deloitte and you had their cybersecurity team keeping an eye on you. But when we looked at it, we went, well, actually, is the market homes? And we went, actually, a lot of the market that might be better is startups in co-working spaces, because you've co-working spaces in DCU. People turn around, they go in, they start a fintech company, they go in, they get Wi-Fi with their hot desk, they open it up and just start to work. But they're on open Wi-Fi and then they're trying to sell something to a bank. It doesn't make any sense. So we were looking at it going, actually, we should be plugging that device in, and within a startup space, these people should have their own private Wi-Fi network. And we were looking at that and we went, yeah, that's a better model. And by the way, instead of getting 15 quid a month from a family, we can get 100 quid a month from a good startup for the same tech and infrastructure. Do you get what I mean? It's the same piece of hardware, but we can sell it for a lot more. Now, while we were in the middle of doing that, COVID hit, and suddenly half the world's population needed to work from home. And we were going, Jesus, what a product marketing opportunity this is. And we've seen great opportunities to be able to just, have people working from home. This morning, somebody bought a Gypsy because they work in a finance department of a big multinational. They're working from home. They're just connecting to their broadband and they're going, that's just not safe enough. So it's amazing how industries switch like that, where we figured the initial idea was for homes. We figured we'd get a lot more money with startups. Suddenly all the co-working spaces are just shut, so that's of no use to us. But this bizarre thing happens around COVID and there's an opportunity there. So I actually think in the end we'll flip back towards the startups and the small businesses, because there's more revenue there for the same device. And it's less hassle and everything, but that's where I think what you have to do is you have to think about what's the behavior point. Now, what's really interesting for us is women buy the Gypsy product for home. Men don't. Why don't they? because in the adverts, men see this thing can block porn, and they go, "Oh, I don't need to be bringing that into the house." All right. Whereas mothers are looking at it going, "I have no idea what my child is doing."
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have the IT skill set to know what my child is doing. But if I turn around and tell my kids, here's your connection to the internet, and there's somebody somewhere looking out for it, making sure my kid doesn't become addicted to porn, doesn't become isn't clicking on, the worst isn't the teenager a lot of the time. The teenager might be looking at porn or gambling or, buying something on the dark web. The worst one is the fucking 7-year-old on your corporate laptop who has no understanding of what a phishing attack is and embarrasses you with the boss because they've now, after putting a bunch of viruses onto your laptop, and you were expected to have worked from that. So, you can't expect an 8-year-old to know what that hyperlink was for in the middle of Roblox or something like that, and that's where we look at it and we go, what is the decision making around buying that? And what's the message you want to get across to people to be able to do it? And we built our whole product on a gypsy.ie. And right now the message is about families. But when co-working opens back up again, we'll probably have a completely separate website for small businesses to go, guys, you can't be running your fintech startup or any other startup and doing it on open Wi-Fi in coffee shops.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. That's interesting.
So it's about understanding behavior and figuring out the maths around it afterwards.
Yeah.
Like I'm literally, most of my day this morning now was on the fact that we're just about to start pay-per-click campaigns in the run-up to Christmas for those Gypsy products, and figuring out how do we do it, where do we advertise, what do we do.
Great. So just 3 more questions here, and then I'll let you go if that's okay.
No problem.
One here from Anna is, how would you go about investing into a startup as a student? So maybe you have some funds, you want to invest into startups.
There are work backwards in the opposite direction. All right. Have a look at the best thing to do. If I'm a student in DCU and I go, I have an idea, I'm looking for an investor. The first thing to do is get in touch with the entrepreneurship offices, the innovation offices within the colleges. And don't just ask your own, ask a few of them and say, where did the investors come from? Because quite often what you find is professional investors don't do one investment and go off and try something else. They'll regularly do multiples of the same type of investment. So what you're looking for is someone who's already invested in a student startup. And you go, I see you gave them money. Here's what I'm doing. Would this interest you? But the best thing to do in all of these things is never ask them for money. Ask them for the advice. And by listening to that advice, people will tell you who's interested in that. And you'll eventually find it. And the great thing about Ireland is the doors are easy to open here. They really are.
Yeah. And the next one here for you is short and simple. Do you think drop shipping is the way forward in future for?
I think there's a whole pile of people doing it. I think it's one of these things you might do yourself in the evening, earn a few quid and stuff like that. There's been students doing that for years to earn money, just a bit of buying and selling and stuff like that. It's just manual, and that's why you don't have a lot of businesses do it. It's a bit of fun. If I have anyone there that's a bit technical or anything like that, or if you understand digital media or social media or something like that, I'd be selling my services on Upwork and some of these different places, Fiverr, and looking to see how can I get some contracts and stuff like that. But if you don't ask, you won't get them.
Yeah, a fun little fact about me is I think when I was in 6th year, I had a tiny dropshipping business, but I managed to automate from when the customer hit checkout, I'd have a script that would run and automate the purchasing from AliExpress. So there's definitely, where there's a will, there's a way, for sure.
There is indeed. There is ways to put as much of that kind of stuff there. And also, there's a lot of people out there looking for bodies. They're looking for people to be able to help with different things. And You know, there's plenty ways out there to make money digitally, but you've got to get it. Look, the great thing is Google is there. Keep searching, keep looking, reading up on it, and get comfortable with the stuff that you want to do.
Great. So just the last question here for you now. What type of key information would investors generally look at when conducting their due diligence?
The first thing that I'll tell you about is team. We were funny in that we didn't support teams because we were offering people the team to get started. But everybody else is looking for who's the team, what are the skill sets, how do I know you'll be able to spend my money? You know, how do I know that if I give you this money, we're not just burning it. So what are your skill sets? And then after they've talked about the team, they're then looking at the idea. So what's the idea? What's the maths behind it? Do you understand the level of profitability? One of the real challenges for students is they don't appreciate the costs of things. You know, we had an awful hassle in our fund because we charged people at, I think we were charging between 650 and 750 quid a day. And a lot of people who would have come out and are like, oh, he's just screwing me. Like, how is he charging 750 quid a day? And I'm sitting there looking at it going, do you realize my lawyer charges me 450 euros an hour? and the costs of these and the quality of staff are more expensive. So the real thing with students, before I go to my investors, go to people who understand these businesses to sanity check your cash flows and sanity check how much you think stuff costs. Because a lot of students will go, there's no way he's earning 100 grand a year, or that staff member wants that. Like Irish businesses going into America have a big problem with this, because the minimum cost for a sales guy in America is twice the cost of a sales guy in Ireland. You know, minimum to hire anyone somewhat decent in America is costing me $10,000 a month.
Yeah,
that's the minimum. And yet I can hire in Ireland a pretty decent salesperson at a 50 grand a year basic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's, and the Americans, that's before their commissions, you know. So a lot of it is about expectation levels. And a lot of the time you're shooting yourself in the foot by pitching a good business with bad financials. You know, I mean, the idea is worthless. It's the execution where all the cash is.
Yeah. All right, well, perfect. I think with that, we'll close the event. I want to take the time again to thank you for coming online to speak today as part of Student Startup Day Ireland. For those who are interested in more talks like this, be sure to follow DCU Startup Society on Instagram. And I believe in 2 weeks' time, we're hoping to have a mysterious speaker who's the CEO of a startup in Amsterdam and whose previous startup eventually sold to Vistaprint, the big print publishing online publisher. All will be revealed shortly over at our Instagram, so be sure to follow us over there. Next at 4:30, I believe we have Spark CEO Chris Burge talking about his platform, and I believe we still have tickets available for that on Eventbrite. If you're also curious about what DCU Startup Society events look like before COVID, I'll leave you with this short video.